Welcome to Resistance Live. Since 2017, Resistance Live has been the go-to home for political and legal news and analysis through a decidedly progressive activist lens. I'm your host, Elizabeth Cronise McLaughlin. I'm a former Wall Street and human rights lawyer, a lifelong organizer, and a leadership and impact consultant for all those seeking to lead big progressive change in these incredibly challenging times. To get bonus broadcasts, ask questions, and more, don't forget to become a paid subscriber to the show at patreon.com/resistancelive. And to learn more about what we do to help progressive leaders everywhere, check out GaiaLeadershipProject.com. And now, here's today's show. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the show. It's the 16th of December, 2025. And there is a bombshell breaking news story this morning that the regime is already trying to contain concerning Trump's chief of staff, Susie Wiles. So background, Susie Wiles is apparently given, and again, this is one of those moments where you just have to ask yourself, like, why would you do this? But has apparently given 11 months of consecutive interviews to a reporter at Vanity Fair. And apparently this is somebody who is working on a book about chiefs of staff, has interviewed chiefs of staff historically, and in this instance, kind of somehow managed to get Susie Wiles to say all sorts of things on tape that no rational protective actor would say about a current sitting U.S. president and all of his staff. So there's news that just broke like 2 minutes ago that Susie Wiles is now trying to contain the fallout of this interview. If you don't know, before becoming Trump's chief campaign officer during the re-election campaign and then his chief of staff, Susie Wiles was just a low-level political operative in Florida. She's not somebody who, I don't know, we had heard of in federal political circles prior to this particular administration. And apparently, and that may say something about how this whole thing happened, but apparently in these interviews, she makes a series of incredibly damning statements about pretty much everybody in the Trump inner circle. She refers to Trump as having an alcoholic personality, which she herself knows something about because she was raised by an alcoholic father, and says that, dealing with big personalities is kind of an area of her expertise because her dad was a drunk. She talks about J.D. Vance being a purely political operative who really doesn't believe in anything that MAGA has to say and only became aligned with MAGA when he was running for the U.S. Senate as a power grab. That, by the way, is a huge confirmation of what I've thought about J.D. Vance from the very beginning. She admits that Elon Musk is a regular user of ketamine, that his actions with regard to U.S. aid and other actions of Doge were completely out of line, that she was shocked at the shuttering of U.S. aid, that Elon, as she describes it, is an odd duck, and that she found him very difficult to tolerate. She talks about Pam Bondi having, as she put it, whiffed on the early stages of the Epstein investigation. She admits that everybody knows that Bill Clinton never went to Epstein Island, that when Trump has said that Bill Clinton went to Epstein Island, everybody knows he's lying. She admits that Trump is in the Epstein files. We already knew that. She talks about the way in which Trump is using criminal prosecutions to retaliate against his enemies, that she had a deal with him that he, of course, broke, that after the first 90 days of the administration, he would no longer retaliate against his perceived political opponents. And in essence, it goes on and on and on from there, as if that's not enough. Now, apparently, as you might guess, many of these statements are a total betrayal of the inner circle. And we have yet to see what kind of fallout is going to come from this. Somebody remarked this morning, and actually the New York Times may have mentioned, no, it wasn't the New York Times. It was a commentator that remarked that we really haven't seen anything like this since Ronald Reagan's chief of staff gave a tell-all interview, which almost got him fired. And so now we kind of have like a ticking clock, I think, on Susie Wiles, who, by the way, Trump has adored so much that he refers to her as Susie Trump. So, and not by accident, like on purpose. I know we've seen him do things like that before because of his dementia. But this is going to be quite the popcorn-inducing series of events to watch in the next couple of days. No lies detected in anything that I have seen so far. Apparently, Vanity Fair, the New York Times got the scoop on this because Vanity Fair is about to publish a kind of tell-all. Just be warned that apparently this is accompanied by the usual Vanity Fair glamour shots of people like Pam Bondi and Stephen Miller and various other folks. But in reality, it is a complete confessional of the absolute chaos on the inside of the Trump administration. And I don't know how Susie Wiles recovers from it. You know, just looking at what was reported this morning in the New York Times, you know, which also has all sorts of details from like the photographers for Vanity Fair, like the fact that, you know, Vance was really worried that he was going to look more evil than the other people who were being photographed. And he offered the photographer $1,000 to make him look better than Marco Rubio. The details are like quite a lot. And, you know, I just am looking at all of this, again, amazed by the lack of like what if this really isn't even operational security. It's more like regime rigor, the lack of adherence to what we would consider to be sort of standard operating procedures here, let alone by the person who is the chief of staff of the White House, like arguably the president's most important political advisor after Stephen Miller. You know, nonetheless, like, I don't know what Trump's going to do with this. And I have to say that you should go read the article in the New York Times. And that Vanity Fair expose is going to be a thing to behold, I think. So this is a very big breaking news scandal. And again, we'll see whether or not Susie Wiles has a job by the end of the day. I think there might be some money to be made on some bets about that. So it's quite a lot. It's quite a lot. I suppose it's good to laugh a little bit about this looming scandal, now burgeoning scandal, after the weekend we had, because obviously, as everybody knows by now, we had a mass shooting of Jews on the first night of Hanukkah at Bondi Beach in Australia. We had a mass shooting at Brown, and then we tragically lost Rob Reiner and his wife, reportedly at the hands of his son on Sunday afternoon. I am appalled, of course, by all of this. I was as shocked as I know many of you have been. I will also just say that I had the opportunity to meet Rob Reiner last year in conjunction with some work that we both did with Democrats abroad. And this one just really gutted me. I think it was because many of you may remember, if you were on that call, and I know a lot of you were, that I was in the speaker's lineup after Beto O'Rourke and right before Rob Reiner. And one of the things that was just so memorable about that was that when I finished speaking, Rob Reiner, you know, took to the call, which had like millions of people on it worldwide. And he didn't have to do this, but he like went out of his way to say some really nice things about me, say some really nice things about what I had said, the kinds of things that someone of his stature would not have to say. And we had also been in the green room together prior to speaking. I'd seen him kind of interact with some other folks, and he was a really good egg. You know, I mean, I might not have known him well, but, you know, this one felt very painful and very close in proximity, and was really just devastating. And then on top of it, to have Trump put out an absolutely abhorrent post on Truth Social about Rob Reiner's murder was really just like a kick in the gut. I will say that, you know, a running theme here on this broadcast has been the way in which MAGA is crumbling more or less every single day. And one thing to pay attention to in the context of the way that people responded to Trump's comments about Rob Reiner's murder was that a large number of conservatives actually came out and spoke against what Trump had said. 5 members of the GOP House caucus, and not just people who are not running for re-election, which was quite significant. Yes, it was Thomas Massie. Yes, it was Marjorie Taylor Greene, who I still don't, you know, I mean, like, God knows. I'm still watching that with as much, you know, incredulity as the rest of you. But also some very conservative commentators and people whose voices are listened to on the far right truly condemned what he had said. Fox News had a whole panel that condemned what he had said. And, you know, I think that is not just a testament to Rob Reiner's legacy, which as an advocate, as somebody, as a creative, right? He made your favorite movie or someone you know's favorite movie. By all reports in Hollywood, was a really good guy. And like I said, in my interactions with him went way beyond, and I've met a lot of celebrities and celebrity activists over my time doing this. He went way beyond what I've seen other people do for someone like me, right? And so, it really speaks to who he was, but also I don't want anybody to miss the fact that Trump's comments about Rob Reiner have been condemned by people who, as recently as 2 weeks ago, would have been afraid of blowback from Trump. And there is a growing trend that we just absolutely should be watching, paying attention to, documenting, of people deciding that they've had enough, even on the Republican side of the fence, people deciding that they're not going to kind of stand back and be afraid of what his response is going to be. And I have to say, like, all credit to Thomas Massie for opening this door in many ways by stepping forward and really going to war over the release of the Epstein files. Because I think being in elected office, not retiring, right, but being in elected office and fighting back in that way has given permission for other people in the GOP to step forward and do the same. Now, I'm not giving any credit to people who are taking this much time to kind of decide that they've had enough, because, Charlottesville wasn't enough for you, right? The speech after he came down the escalator wasn't enough for you. Okay, fine. But I will take every victory that we can get. And, I just have to say that, speaking ill of someone who cared so much about this country and who dedicated his non-professional life to trying to fight for marginalized people. Many people don't know this, by the way. The reason why gay marriage passed in California had an enormous amount to do with Rob Reiner. He was one of the funders of the proposition effort that got it passed. He was one of its staunchest advocates. And so for many people who live in California, if you are queer and you are married to a same-sex or gender diverse partner, Rob Reiner is in large part the reason why that is possible. And so, to condemn somebody who, let alone in the midst of an enormous family tragedy with a son who has a long history of drug addiction, allegedly being the perpetrator, is just like too much, just like way, way too much. And I think it really has been like a bridge too far. And I hope that trend continues. I think we are starting to see real cracks, not just in the MAGA base, as we've been talking about here now for several months, thanks to the Epstein scandal, but honestly, like in some of his longest standing supporters. And, I have to say, just to circle back to where we started, the Susie Wiles interview doesn't do them any favors, right? She's out there criticizing in plain language his most loyal sycophants. And that in and of itself is another chip in the foundation. So all of this is a sign of where things are headed. And frankly, I think there's a lot of reason right now. I know it's hard to see this in the face of ICE raids and, ongoing threats and like 3 more boat bombings last night, which we're going to talk about in a minute, to see that there is hope. But the support is crumbling, and it is crumbling because people have had enough. And that's a good thing. Like I said, I will take every win where I can get it. And I also think that the loss of Trump's most loyal, longest serving chief of staff, again, I would be surprised if she has a job by the end of the day, but never say never, will be another massive loss for MAGA and where they're going. Okay, so there were 3 more boats bombed last night by the Department of Defense under Pete Hegseth. 8 more people were killed. There are still impeachment articles hanging out there against Pete Hegseth in the House of Representatives. Again, your assignment today, whether you have MAGA reps or Democratic reps, is to call your rep and demand that they vote in favor of articles of impeachment. Ask them if they're okay with them mass murdering people in boats without any direct evidence, without any due process, let alone when if somebody was smuggling drugs, they would be entitled to a trial. And execution would not be the penalty. It's time to get, increasingly loud about this, because frankly, I think Pete Hegseth is one of the most dangerous people in this administration. The list is long, but he's close to the top. And I do think that there is an incredible need right now for public pressure to move in the direction of his impeachment. All right. Some good news, which I want to focus on just for a minute here, in addition to kind of like the tell-all of Susie Wiles, which I really will admit I'm having like my total schadenfreude moment about, is that Gavin Newsom has made an interesting decision. You all know I'm kind of not the biggest fan of Gavin Newsom because of all of his many anti-trans statements and because he got buddy-buddy with Charlie Kirk and Steve Bannon. And I honestly think he's a political operative who's only in it for himself. But the state of California, all that said, the state of California did something really interesting over the weekend, which is that they hired 2 CDC officials who had been fired by Trump as a part of this purge of officials who were really deeply invested in science and in vaccines and in public health. We already know, if you've been here for a while, we talked about this at the time that it happened, but there have been health coalitions now built in Democratic states in both the Northeast and the Pacific Northwest and the West Coast. These 2 coalitions of public health states are compiling their own data and evidence. They are making their own public health recommendations. And, one of the things that I think is key about this is that we have seen this tremendous gutting of public health scientists and researchers, which is going to impact the public health of Americans for generations to come. So the effort to retain that talent, even in the state of California or in other states, will do something in terms of pushback to protect the research and science. And that in and of itself is also really, really important. So that is a bit of good news that we can focus on for today. All right. That's it for today. The Susie Wiles news is really big. I think this is going to be one of those ones where you're going to want to pull out your popcorn for like the remainder of the day, because the news about this is going to break fast and furious from here on out. It's insane. Like the things that she said in that article, seriously, you should go read it. And they're on tape. She denied, by the way, to the New York Times reporter that she had ever said certain things. And then the reporter played them back to her. So there are also tapes, and one of the things that would be very interesting is to have those tapes released to the public. I would very much like to hear Susie Wiles saying some of these things about Trump's innermost advisors and friends in the public domain. I think that would be an actual really good moment, not just of schadenfreude, but also of political weakness. And, I'm all about finding those any chance we get right now on the MAGA side of the fence. All right, that's it for today. Please like this broadcast. Please subscribe. If you're watching here on YouTube, give our channel a subscription. Also, please remember, the way this broadcast keeps going is through our paid subscribers on Patreon. I love you guys. If you are not yet a paid subscriber, if this broadcast is meaningful to you, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive, where you can become a subscriber for as little as $5 a month. You get to ask me questions in advance of every broadcast for 3 hours. I will answer them in writing or on the air. And also, you get access to bonus broadcasts every single week. You can join now at an annual rate for 20% off using the code FALL2025 all the way through the 31st of December. You can also gift memberships if you have friends or family who might benefit from being a part of our community. So thank you very much to all of our subscribers, to all of our subscribers here on the YouTube channel who are live chatting as we speak. I see you guys, you rock. And I will be here all week at regular time. Next week, because of the holidays, we will not be here on our regular schedule, but we will have a bonus Monday broadcast, which we don't usually do. So more on that coming up later on in the week. All right, everybody, have a great rest of your Tuesday, and I will see you back here live tomorrow. Thanks so much. That's our show for today, folks. Thanks so much for being here at Resistance Live. To get more out of the show, including bonus broadcasts, the answers to all your most pressing political and legal questions, and way more, head on over to patreon.com/resistancelive and become a paid subscriber. And don't forget to hit subscribe here on your favorite podcasting platform to make sure that you never miss an episode. See you next time.